All right, Matt Harmon is here. Reception Perception, Yahoo Fantasy Football, Football 301 with our buddy Nate Tice. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. It's a good time, man. It's week 11. Always feels like we know things are settled. I know who certain teams are. I know where certain things are going, and obviously all of that will be blown to smithereens.
Yeah, we say that, but again, like I always go back to think about what we thought about Jordan Love this time last year. Just think about that, and then I say, oh, everything changed. And like I did an exercise a couple weeks ago where I just looked at the power rankings of it from that week, the previous year, and it was like the Dolphins were second, the Jaguars were like sixth, and it's like it is actually like the November is the false sense of security month. That's the way I would put it, because we think we know these teams, and then like. I remember the Eagles, the freaking Eagles. Like this time last year, nobody was like, Nick Sirianni should lose his job. Now, not only has he not lost his job, but he's gone from 100% fired to now like 80% going to survive till next year. So it's an interesting time. Fantasy's a little different, obviously, because you're ramping up towards the playoffs and all that, and you kind of know the players and the workload and all that. But yeah.
Well, you say that, but then there's one random running back that wins people fantasy championships every year. That's probably actually the best. Like, and I have no idea who that player is going to be. Don't ask me about that.
Who's the all-time for you? The all-time, like, oh my God, like, God bless this guy.
Ernest Graham in my Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back in my like first few years playing fantasy football. Like, I do not win a fantasy championship without Ernest Graham and Jamal Lewis in his season with the Browns. That was like the two running backs yeah, I know. Stupidest duo of running backs of all time.
Wow. All right. So we have some news here. We're going to start here. Anthony Richardson is the Colts starter again. I thought they should have done this. The only weird part is that Shane Steichen said Joe Flacco was a starter 2 days ago. Signals to me organizational meddling, I guess you could say. Like, it's not like you're going to watch the film like a third time and be like, Eureka, there should be a quarterback change. Like, Steichen knows what he saw on Sunday, said it on Monday anyway. Then Wednesday, Anthony Richardson's the starter. For me, Richard needs time to develop. I've made the point a million times that, and it's different for everybody, right? Like the Bryce Young situation was totally different from the Anthony Richardson situation. Mm-hmm. But the Richardson situation, to me, it's just one of the most mind-boggling plans I've ever seen in my entire life. To say this guy hasn't played a lot of football, his athleticism is tantalizing. We're going to take him and develop him, and then not develop him. That to me just shows organizational dysfunction. It shows a bunch of people trying to save their jobs, frankly, and now they're trying to save their jobs in a different way. And it was funny because I think David Hellman said this on Twitter today, but he was like, it's mind-boggling the amount of decisions that are made for somebody to go 9-8. And the thing I always get to with this, Matt, is somebody in the league said this to me. I think about it all the time. Football is like every other workplace. And before anybody makes a decision, and we think it's this ruthless efficiency machine, oh, yeah, they're going to do this because they know ball and we don't. Let me tell you what people in football are thinking about. Bunch of mortgages due. They got the BMW X3. They gotta figure that out. Big payments on that one. Kids are in private school. So the goal is to not have a problem making any of those payments. Just like you and I, just like our buddies who work in finance, it's just a normal industry. Everybody's trying to keep their job. And once you look at every decision through that prism, everything makes a lot more sense. So I'll leave it. I don't want to do any more macro talk about the decision-making process of the NFL, but like Anthony Richardson does what to the Colts, Matt?
Yeah, look, I mean, I actually think that it would have been a defensible decision to say, hey, we're going to give this guy a beat. If that's the plan here, let's just because things I do think we're starting to spiral for Richardson. This is a guy who has always seemingly been a good processor and has a good handle on what he's being asked to do. And he also is a guy who always avoided sacks. In the last few games, he was starting to, I think, hesitate in the pocket and started taking sacks. There were also Nate's done a good job pointing this out, like operational errors in this offense. That was a consistent part of it. So that just, I think that showed a player who starting to lose the thread a little bit. The spiral was beginning to happen. If you want to say as an organization, we're going to give this guy a little beat and hopefully he comes back better on the other side. The problem is just the messaging of it all. And the
dismissiveness of Richardson as a prospect over the past couple of weeks.
Oh yeah. To say things like that would be nice.
Yeah. That'd be great. I'd love that for him. If he ever, contributed meaningfully to an NFL game again. What are you talking about, Shane? You drafted him in the top 10 a year ago.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, this is an organization that it was just 2 years ago that they hired Jeff Saturday off the ESPN, set. So like there's a lot of dysfunction going on here for this team overall. But yeah, I mean, I'm I'm certainly still hopeful that Richardson can develop into something, especially because I like the ecosystem around him from a talent perspective. These guys are not perfect receivers. Like A.D. Mitchell has made some rookie mistakes. Josh Downs hasn't consistently been available. Michael Pittman has. I mean, that's another thing too. Like this guy is your best receiver. You just paid him $20 million. He doesn't have anything to prove for you. I'm sure he wants to play Pittman's a warrior, the whole thing. Just put that guy on IR like 3 weeks ago, man, because the film hasn't been good on Michael Pittman this year. And I don't, there's nothing I'm questioning about Pittman. I just think he hasn't been 100% healthy. Mm-hmm. So why not get Richardson out here and just get him reps with guys like Josh Downs, who's a great player, in my opinion. I think one of the most underrated receivers. You asked me guys we should be talking more about. Like I think Downs should be talked more about as one of these inner circle wideouts. A.D. Mitchell has a ton of potential. Like let's get Richardson reps with these guys, and hopefully we're building towards something in 2025. Now, again, I just think all of that is on such tenuous ground because of the way this has been messaged and probably internally handled.
Well, also everybody's going to get fired. Like that's the biggest problem for me. And it was Kalen Kaler I was talking about this with a couple weeks ago, but like the most humbling thing for me over the past, the thing I've humbled myself on over the past couple of years is always saying reflexively, oh, this guy will figure it out somewhere else. Oh, Josh Rosen and his next destination is going to get developed. He didn't get enough of a chance in Arizona. The problem is you go somewhere where everybody's not invested in you, or a new regime comes in and they're not invested in you. You don't get the practice reps. They sign a guy to come in for $10 million behind you who's going to push you and probably take a bunch of the mental reps, the meeting time, the actual reps and mini camps, all that stuff. Once you get into a situation where you're not the priority, it's really hard to get out of that. And so for me, the biggest problem is they'll get a new head coach. Maybe they'll get a new GM. I think they should get a new of both. But then a new coach comes in and says, I don't know. Do I really want to hitch my wagon to the guy who just got Shane Steichen fired? And then you just get into a spiral and then you're out of the league. So I think that's the biggest thing for me is like, this is why quarterbacks fail, is they get caught in kind of the franchise spin cycle and never get out.
Well, it's like you just said, whoever the next head coach comes in here, the first thing he's going to be thinking about is, how do I pay the mortgage? How do I keep the kids in school? How do I make the car payments?
Easier in Indy than in New York, by the way.
Certainly, that's gonna help out a little bit, but at the same time, those bills still come due on the first to the 4th of every month.
Yeah,
and if Richardson's not the guy to do that, they get that sense early on. There's going to be a much lower level of commitment, and I think he's a guy that's still. I don't know if he needs reps or he just needs to develop. And, there's obviously different people have different opinions about, can you do that when you're playing, or can you do that when you're sitting, or can it be one or the other? And every case is different. So I do think I'm definitely worried that he's going to get caught in that cycle. And this will always be a great, what could have been story. But I agree with you that we hold on to our priors for so long. And there are certain cases, Rashad Bateman's a good example of this. Is a guy that, he's at the wide receiver position, obviously. Mm-hmm. And he's someone that dealt with a lot of injuries, but when he was on the field, he was offering you good play. And it's probably, he's certainly never going to be a prospect I hoped he could be, but because there were injuries and the team continued to have faith in him, and it's the same guys there that keep building him up. This offseason, when they're talking about, I'm like, all right, well, this doesn't have to just be over. He can give them something. He has given them something. But in a situation where maybe he went somewhere else, they're less invested in him, all that type of stuff. Or if it was just, he's just not playing well, like Anthony Richardson is just, I think, objectively not playing well, even if you can find certain clips and make certain excuses and this, that, and the other. The bottom line is he's not playing well. This is one of those situations that it can be over a lot faster than we want to admit.
I completely agree. But also, I mean, the other thing, when you talk about holding on to the priors, we saw that a lot when Trey Lance went to Dallas. And we had all these people being like, is this a message about Dak Prescott? No, it's not. It's about Cooper Rush. And even that Cooper Rush was able to beat him out. Just because somebody was drafted high doesn't mean they're good. And so that's one thing I've humbled myself on. It's just been like, oh, this guy was drafted. Sometimes guys get overdrafted. It happens. They get, and then whatever. I could do all day on this. Speaking of the draft, I was going to say speaking of overdrafted, but I don't want to. I'm trying to pay bills. I'm trying to pay my bills. No, I like Caleb Williams. I think he's got a nice career ahead of him. But boy, this is a rough go of it. And the funniest, I want to say, I want to cite this. I think it was the Barstool Chicago guys. I think I saw. I didn't listen to it, but I saw somebody tweet about this. That this is sort of living out the what if Mahomes was drafted by the Bears theory. Like it would have looked like this. It would have been organizational failure, wouldn't have the right coach, doesn't have the right GM, doesn't have the right ownership, doesn't solve problems. Like I thought that was a pretty good take. You can tweet at me who actually said that, and I'll give them a thumbs up. But I believe it was on the Barstool Chicago podcast. Anyway, there's a lot here. Caleb has been playing poorly, but so is his offensive line. And it's funny because he was sacked 9 times. He's been sacked more than any other quarterback in football this year. And when I was watching, I watched every sack he'd taken this year. And my feeling is that they were probably equal parts his fault and the line's fault. I mean, there were somewhere and first of all, for whatever reason, he lends himself, maybe because he's a big guy, he lends himself to incredibly violent sacks. Like guys really, they get a full head of steam, they get around the left tackle, and he just gets the crap knocked out of him.
Yeah.
Which watching all those sacks, like boy, geez, like a couple where he just kind of falls over. But leaving aside that, we talked before we started recording about the most disappointing receivers in the NFL. You said that was going to be a segue into your Bears discussion. So you have the floor. What is wrong right now with the Bears receiving corps?
Yeah, well, you definitely touched on the fact that when something is this bad, it's not because of one thing. You know, I think seemingly anytime you talk about the Bears, you get a lot of pushback if you don't assign some blame to Caleb Williams. Yeah. Like, we don't have to say like Caleb Williams is not playing poorly. Is playing poorly. Look at the results. Like he is obviously contributing to the problem here. But I would say specifically on the receiver room, the talking point going into this year, I'm sure I said it. Other people said it. This is one of the best situations, if not the best situation we've ever seen a number 1 overall pick walk into at quarterback because of these 3 receivers. But that does not matter anymore because look at how these guys have played so far this year. And specifically, the one I'm least surprised is playing at the level he's playing at is Keenan Allen, because I've been saying this for the last 2-3 years that Keenan Allen has been trending down as a player. And he's just at that point in his career, like, he was very productive for the LA Chargers last year, but while running the entire passing offense through Keenan Allen, the offense was not good. Like anybody that watched Chargers football last year is like, there's something missing here. Like there's a dimension missing. Well, when your top receiver is a 30-year-old receiver who can only really win in the short and intermediate areas, and you're running 130, 140 targets to this guy, there's going to be a diminishing level of returns there. He's now a worse version of that player on the Bears. And also, they seemingly don't realize that either. Yeah. That's another thing that's bizarre and we can get into the Shane Waldron of all of it and how they've thrown out these roles. The one that surprises me the most who's not playing up to his potential is DJ Moore, because he's coming off a great season. I think DJ Moore has always been probably what I would call like a tier 3 receiver, but last year he played more like a tier 2 receiver, like not quite an elite guy, but a notch below that. Right. So this year so far, there's been a lot of poor routes. There's been, I would say, a lack of effort. Like few people have been wearing their frustration on their sleeve more than DJ Moore, which again is bizarre. He's coming off being paid a big contract. He's coming off a great year. But I don't know, Kevin, you start to think about it. At some point, doesn't it just feel like this offense has too much stuff going on with it? Yeah. Beyond like, okay, we need to cut out the Gerald Everett plays in the first few games of the week. We don't need the DeAndre Carter screens. We certainly don't need to be handing the ball off to a backup offensive lineman on the goal line. That's some fat we can really trim out. But even when you just think about these 3 receivers, because they also have Roman Dunze, they draft in the top 10, at some point, like, egos are going to start to get in the way here because, like, all right, well, great. Like, me and Rome are having a connection here, but I'm Caleb Williams. I got to get the ball to DJ Moore on this player. Like, Keenan Allen's starting to get a little frustrated. So he's running, like, freelancing on these option routes and he doesn't get separation. So I just like this entire unit was built up to be something that maybe it was never going to be because Keenan Allen wasn't that type of player anymore. But really, just the results all the way around have been extremely underwhelming.
I like that we're edging towards maybe the situation was too good for Caleb Williams. Maybe that's the problem. There were just too many options. Maybe the next number 1 overall pick should have less options. No, I agree. And I think that I don't know what the hell the Bears are going to do. And the DJ Moore thing, the body language doctor certainly doesn't like what he sees. I think, regardless of what I've heard, and I've heard things, but looking, he seems incredibly unhappy. Okay,
Yeah.
just looking. If I'm watching the film, he looks incredibly unhappy.
It's not that hard to see.
Yes. And so like all people being like, oh, so. It's like, yeah, I can see that. You don't need to tell me that. But why wouldn't he be happier with Caleb Williams and Justin Fields? That's why I don't understand. Is like, is it because they brought in more targets? Is it because they drafted a first a pick with the ninth overall wide receiver and brought in Keenan Allen? Did he think he was supposed to be like getting every single target? I honestly just don't know what his gripe is.
I think that when you're a receiver, and I've talked to some receivers about this, and you know that you're drawing dead before you walk into the game on Sunday, not just because of who's in charge, but what you're being asked to do. Like, it doesn't matter how much money you're currently making. You know, the next I talk about paying the bills, you know, the next time that it comes up for a contract, you're going to be judged on what you're doing going forward. So, it's easy to sit there and say like, yeah, DJ Moore, you got paid all this money. Like, why are you not happy? All this, that, and the other. I think when you just watch what this offense has put through these receivers, like, they play incredibly wide formations. Nothing really works off of each other from a route combination standpoint. We don't have a lot of like, all right, high-low concepts where this guy's going to open up the other. There's nothing of that. I mean, and again, for DJ Moore, a guy who's played under Matt Rule, a guy who's played under some like truly dysfunctional programs down there in Carolina.
Bad stuff.
But really bad stuff. To come out in the first month of the season and be like, you know, we probably should be scripting the first 15 plays. Or, we probably should, like, and again, talk about wearing his frustration on his sleeve. I just don't think there's ever been a lot of belief in what he was going to be asked to do this year. And, you know, again, this is a guy coming off a career year in the last offense with the last quarterback. I'm not saying that he doesn't want to play with Caleb Williams. I don't know that for a fact or anything, but again, guy that's coming off a career year with the last system and the last quarterback. I know that they didn't get where they wanted to go from a team success standpoint, but you can't tell me that that's not, you know, on your mind a little bit here. So I just think from the real issue and the real problem for this Bears receiver core is it's not just necessarily the talent of the players, it's what they've been tasked to do. I mean, because even if you look back at the last year's stats with Shane Waldron in Seattle, they were like a piss poor team against man coverage. And Tyler Lockett can get open against man coverage. Yeah. DK Metcalf can beat man coverage. Jackson Smith-Njigba, when he's cooking in the slot, can be a man coverage mismatch there. So what's the issue here? It's not the quarterback. I think it's what the offense and how it's constructed.
Yeah, and I'll say this, not that he's a model for how players should operate if they're not being targeted, but I remember talking to George Pickens, and I said, why are you such a violent, enthusiastic blocker? And he said, well, as I rose up the ranks of football, you don't get the ball on every single play. I'm sure he did in middle school, and I'm sure he did early in high school, but he realized that there will be plays that are not drawn up for him, and so the only way to draw attention to himself was to just knock a cornerback on his ass. And so that's how he learned how to block, is he needed the attention. He literally said this. He needed the attention on himself all the time. So maybe DJ Moore can do that. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll send him some clips to Hallis Hall, and we'll go from there. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words: Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer: hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app; it's an empire. All right, let's talk about some good stuff. What is the best receiving core in the NFL right now?
Yeah, a month ago, before injuries, I probably would have said either Tampa Bay or San Francisco, but Godwin, Ayuk not being there sort of makes that a moot point. This also, I'll sort of talk out of the other side of my mouth here with this. When T. Higgins is out there, I think it is Cincinnati right now, because I think Jamar Chase is just playing at that level from an individual standpoint. I know he goes crazy every single time he goes against the Ravens, but this is a guy right now who really just checks every single box. I've always thought he's a very underrated technician, a really good route runner. Talk about somebody who every time I've mentioned to him about his route running, he's like, yeah, I study guys like Keenan Allen and Devontae Adams and all of these like true real deal route runners. But he's also one of the most explosive players with the ball in his hands. He's also a guy that can win in tight coverage. He's showing you everything you want from a truly elite receiver. Higgins is maybe not at that level, but he's certainly one of the best 2s in the league. And then I think they have a lot of guys behind them they can, you know, Jermaine Burton in time, if he can ever get off the slot machine, I think he can be somebody who can help them.
Not good.
Not good.
Yoshivas
is useful as well. So they have like some playable guys behind him, which is what I would have said about San Francisco too, because I think Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall and these guys provide a lot of depth. It's just that they don't have Ayuk anymore. That's obviously a problem.
Receiver should we talk more about?
Yeah, I mentioned Josh Downs. I think Downs is like he gets kind of pigeonholed in the pop gun, little target slot receiver mold. This is a guy who absolutely smokes man coverage down the field. He's more of the Tyler Lockett type of, I can use you inside as a weapon, but if we need to, we can ask him to do the downfield routes. I mean, it's in this whole discussion about Anthony Richardson and, is Joe Flacco better for the production of the receivers and all that stuff. I know that, there was a play where people call it a busted coverage play that he scored the 69-yard touchdown on, did Josh Downs, because two Houston defenders ran into each other. One guy's only in the position that he's in because Josh Downs, and I think it's Jalen Petrie, absolutely smokes him off the line of scrimmage and at the break point of the route in man coverage. What was a close, almost touchdown down at the 1 yard line, tight coverage play. Again, man coverage from the slot. He's a guy that I think would, in almost any other universe, should be not just a downfield weapon, but also a guy that catches like 100+ passes as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's funny. They're in what was the book? I forget what it's called. It was about analytics, and basically the point was like, we always say like, oh, this team made a mistake. This is pass interference. Wow, they're so undisciplined. Like, no. They committed pass interference because the offense is good. That's an offensive stat, right? And so for me, when you talk about busted coverage, I saw a stat the other day that Quentin Johnston is running away with yardage and receptions. I don't know if you saw this from busted coverage. And was that your stat?
No, not my stat.
Okay, but it seems like a stat you would have. I'm just going to attribute it to you. But like, I don't think it's a coincidence. I just think it's the Chargers offense and the stretch they put on defense bust coverage. Like if they were playing a high school team, I promise you they would never bust coverage because they could keep everything in front of them. Like I don't think Quentin Johnson is Calvin Johnson here. I think it's more about the stress here that the Chargers offense and Justin Herbert, and to find guys in busted coverage, that's not easy as well. Like it's a different deal.
Yeah. What doesn't happen is they go into like a defense goes into any given play or even game planning and thinking, well, we don't got to worry about Quentin Johnson, so we can just not cover him.
We're going to bust our coverage.
Yeah. But there are a lot of other things going on in the offense that puts, I mean, I don't know if you saw the quote from Mike Tomlin talking about Deontay Johnson.
I did.
Where he said he doesn't show up on a lot of their video. And by the way, what a big bit of a bag fumble by Deontay Johnson to talk your way out of Carolina, where you would have just gotten like 10 targets a game and now you're not even playing for the Ravens. But basically said they have a lot of other threats that occupy my attention. That is how defensive game planning works. And when you play the Chargers, which I love the Chargers. I think this is a really good defense, obviously, and the offense is way better than the receiving personnel might indicate. There are still other things you're paying attention to than beyond Quentin Johnson, which causes those mistakes. And a guy that like Johnston, who, is, I think, put in a better position now than he was as a rookie, way better position now than he was as a rookie, certainly can be the benefactor of that.
I think with Johnston, which, like, I thought about this, but I didn't think. So Harbaugh came in to San Francisco and just made guys better, made them tougher. And I weirdly think that so much of it is just belief. Like, I really do think that he believes in his guys. And it's a weird thing to say, but like, are you a soccer fan at all?
No, not really.
So Mauricio Pochettino, who's the new U.S. soccer coach, he made Tottenham Hotspur, which is my team, much better about a decade ago, much better. And I read his book, and literally, like every anecdote was the same. It was a player who he got made better. They would come into their office and be like, "What do we need to do better?" And he would say, "You need to run more and like believe in yourself." And like that was it. That was over and over and over again. And like it worked. I don't know how it worked, but it worked. And it wasn't tactical, wasn't anything. It was fitness and it was toughness and it was mental toughness, and then you get better. And I think there's this weird voodoo that Jim Harbaugh puts on players where they just we have a data point here. He puts them in a position to succeed, but also they have more confidence. I don't know what it is, but Quentin Johnson looking not only like an NFL player, but a good NFL player is the best data point I have on this in the last few years.
I mean, you just see him before the game with Herbo, calling him Herbo and smacking him and all this stuff. And like the clip that Chargers put out where he's like, beast, what a beast. There is a level of confidence seeping through every part of that organization that was definitely not there in previous years. And also too, I think for players, it's going back to the DJ Moore point, what you're asking these guys to do and the confidence level that they have in that is critical here, because Johnston as a rookie was just lined up as an X receiver. Like, oh, well, we lost Mike Williams. We just let's throw our next big fast guy there. And there was 0.0 evidence based on his college film that he could do those things. And that's what they asked him to do, which again, you do something that you can't, you're not good at, you're going to lose belief in yourself along the
way. Offense that you feel best about going forward. And I'm talking about like, and maybe Jordan Love, I mentioned him earlier, is a good example of something that happened last year where it's like they just turned it on and they took off. So like, is there an offense or receiving core, anything that you're looking at and saying, hey, this team is actually going to make some noise in December and January?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious answer would be Baltimore. If we're just talking like top of the league, I think it's them, just because they can hurt you so many different ways. It comes back to that Tomlin quote where you want to take one thing away. Well, they can throw different layers at you. Probably a team that's a little less obvious, but you did mention Jordan Love. I would say is Green Bay, because that receiver room, talk about from like a fantasy perspective, is a nightmare to try to predict like who's going to do what when. But they have so many different answers to problems based on the personnel that they have. And I mean, the guys are getting better there too. That's what's exciting to see. Like Jaden Reed, they're putting more on his plate this year, and they should, because that's a guy that in any other offense would be a number one receiver who gets 130 targets, and we game plan everything around Jordan Reed. They don't have to do that here, because a guy like Romeo Doubs, who I think was not a great player, not a consistent player as a rookie, he's gotten better every step of the way. And he's now their guy that, even if he's not the most explosive, he's not Christian Watson, he's not Dontavian Wicks from like a separation standpoint, but he's reliable as hell. He gets off the line of scrimmage really well, and him and Jordan Love are always on the same page. So when they get these like single coverage looks on the outside and they need just 7 yards for the first down or something like that, there's a lot of confidence to alert those plays and to go to Romeo Doubs there. And this is a guy that a month and a half ago was, suspended for potentially complaining about his role. So they're an offense that I feel, and
he basically quit the team for a couple days.
Right. Which is, different. Normally guys don't get rewarded for that, but he's come out of that stretch playing extremely well. And even Tucker Kraft he has like no air yards per target, but he has so many yards after the catch, because it's like, all right, we'll just get the ball out to that guy in the flat, and he's a problem solver for him.
Fantasy breakout guy of 2025, a guy where maybe we're not talking about him right now, but boy, like he's going to be in a better situation next year, or he just has a little bit of, a couple things to develop. Doesn't matter. You have the floor. What do you got?
Yeah, I'll go back to the Chargers here, and I'll say Ladd McConkey, who already is kind of breaking out a little bit. He's had his moments. He's the number one target on this team, but there's just so much inherent trust between him and Herbert, and you can feel that when you watch the games. Right now, like I just put out when this podcast comes out, I think Thursday. The rookie report. Yeah, it'll be out on receptionperception.com, the rookie report. I mean, people are going to be surprised by like his numbers in man and press coverage based on kind of the stereotype of the slot, like the white slot receiver.
It's insane. It's insane that we just do that all the time. Oh, he's a Hunter Renfrow type. What?
It could not be any more different than a Hunter Renfrow type, especially the way he runs out routes was so impressive at Georgia, and that's translated to the NFL field. And like talk about like landmarks and being where a quarterback expects him to be. Ladd's always on those. He's consistently open against man coverage. So again, he's somebody that I think could be, like a 1,200-yard receiver if the Chargers open things up. And they have started to open things up. Coming out of their bye week, they're third in the NFL in neutral pass rate. So yeah, I mean, color me surprised that the Chargers are not calling, like Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh are not calling their offense the same way that they did, a decade plus in San Francisco.
You mentioned the rookie report. So obviously, I think that I saw a stat from Schefter the other day that this weekend is the best week 11 in history as far as teams with 7 wins playing each other, because you have the Ravens game, Ravens against the Steelers, Bills, Chargers, and then Eagles and Commanders on Thursday night. I want to talk about the Bills and the Chiefs in particular. You mentioned the rookie report. Xavier Worthy and Keon Coleman, obviously, we thought were going to have huge impacts on this offense. Keon Coleman, although he's banged up now, has had some impact. I mean, my thing with him watching him at Florida State was he disappeared for games at a time, and then he'd come out and have a breakout game. And I think I think volatility is something you have to get used to with Keon Coleman, frankly. Xavier Worthy, I thought was had a really high floor. I thought that, and I kept making the joke, although it doesn't seem to matter, that Xavier Worthy is the most important player in football, because if he is who he could be, then the season is over. Like if he turns into Tyreek Hill 2.0, the season is over, and we need to find a new league. It turns out that the Chiefs are just going to go undefeated and win the Super Bowl without him becoming Tyreek Hill 2.0. So I'll give you the floor on that. What are you thinking about both those receiving cores right now?
Yeah, so specifically with Coleman, I don't know if because I came on your show like before the draft or right around then, and we might have talked about this, but I thought that Keon Coleman would be a really interesting prospect to move into the slot and be kind of like one of these power slot receivers. No such usage so far this year for Keon Coleman with the Buffalo Bills, who has exclusively, almost exclusively been an outside and on the line of scrimmage receiver. He's been their X. And we haven't quite gotten a lot of data with him and Amari Cooper on the field yet at the same time, because Cooper played X receiver so well for the Cleveland Browns, but he's also a guy that has previously with like the Cowboys moved around the formation a little bit more. So we don't quite know what the plan is when those guys are both healthy, but based on what Coleman's done so far, he's mostly exclusively been the X, and that is always going to lead to volatility because he is not a separator. And like, that's just is what it is with him as a player. Now he's a great ball winner and he's really explosive after the catch, which is kind of my whole thing is like, yeah, he can get himself open on slants and digs, but let's put him in a position where he can get more of those routes. What if he's running over the middle of the field and we use that explosive power after the catch? I think that would maximize him and make him more of a consistently productive player. But he's a good player and a useful player for Buffalo. And I also kind of understand the fact that like Khalil Shakir is awesome and he is a slot guy, so we can't really move him around. Worthy is a trickier discussion because he just has not been a good player for Kansas City so far. Like, I definitely think there's evidence that he is, when he's on the field, defenses are accounting for him. And I mean, it was no better expressed than in the early season when Rashee Rice is on the field, because like early in the season, because like, why can't teams just cover up Rashee Rice on these in-breaking routes and these slants and things like that? It's like, well, a lot easier said than done when Worthy's out there and Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback, and regardless of who else you're fielding at wide receiver, you have to defend every blade of grass. So maybe he's been useful for the team in that way, but from a size standpoint, all the negatives have shown up. He doesn't beat press. He doesn't consistently get open against man coverage. He doesn't break tackles after the catch, and he doesn't win contested. So unless something changes with him as a player, other than that though, so I think it's been a pretty tough run out for Xavier Worthy as a receiver so far for Kansas City. And it doesn't matter at all. And it doesn't matter at all.
And it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Nothing matters. I used to have a bit on the Over and NFL show where we'd always go through this whole thing about, this team is going to do this, and I'd go, and the Patriots are going to win the Super Bowl. So, and then they would win the Super Bowl, and none of it mattered. And we'd talk all about Justin Herbert and his emergence and blah, 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 blah. And then the Patriots would win the Super Bowl. Couple more for you. Best insight of guys we haven't talked about from your rookie report.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, we touched briefly on the Bears. I do think that Rome Odunze has been a little bit better than maybe the stats would show. I actually kind of think more Rome, less Keenan is one answer for what Chicago can do. It's not going to solve everything. Like, they decide to run their whole offense out of Rome Odunze. Like, now it's fixed. No, that's not it. But I think we can get more of him involved in also particular ways that they've used DJ Moore. Like, I think they've tried to move Rome around, which I kind of get. Like, you maybe want to get him some big over routes from the slot, but I think he fits better as an X receiver than DJ Moore, whereas DJ Moore maybe fits better as that slashing flanker, over the middle yards after catch stuff. But the one thing I would say that people probably would not think of is I think the Panthers have two rookies that can play in Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker. I mean, Cokeheads rise up on this one, baby. Yeah, because I would say with Legette, the thing with him was he was similar to Keon Coleman. Not that I wanted to be a power slot, but I didn't want him to get typecasted in a way where he's just big body. Let's use him at X and let's have him run routes down the field. Canales has done a good job of using him off the line of scrimmage.
The Keon Coleman route, you mean?
Yes, correct.
Role?
What's happening with Keon Coleman here? I didn't want that to be Legette because I think he's even less prepared necessarily to do that than a guy like Keon Coleman is. So I love the way they've used him. They've got him on a lot of these runway routes. And with Coker, he just looks like he's actually getting to play power slot because he's a bigger guy. He's over 6 feet. He's over 200 pounds. He has a really good sense of zone coverage, really good, like when to sit down. I'm not going to say he's going to become the next Chris Godwin, but he kind of fits in that type of mold as a player.
Last thing I had in the show sheet, George Pickens, question mark.
I will say this as somebody who's been skeptical of Pickens at times, the consistency of him as a player, especially in his rookie season. I thought he got a little bit overhyped as a rookie because of some of the highlight reel catches and things like that, when I wanted to see more consistency down to down with him as a technician, as a route runner. I thought he started this year in the first like 3 games playing the best football of his career. Yeah. It just wasn't being maximized in the offense because of some of the field stuff. And, Arthur Smith is a new coordinator figuring things out. I love what I've seen from him with Russell Wilson under center. I was skeptical of Russ. I think most of us were skeptical of Russ, but it's a pretty cool fit to just see a guy who, like, this is the thing with Pickens, a lot of like fantasy bros wanted to, like, let's have him run more routes over the middle and things like, well, that's not what he does. Like, no. we don't want to take him. We can do some of that stuff because he can make plays after the catch, but why not just continue to hammer and ask him to do the things that he's great at, which is run go routes and corner routes and win along the sideline. Nobody's a better fit for that than this version of Russell Wilson, certainly.
What he likes doing is running routes that the DB's never seen before, like little tiny tricks in his go balls and stuff like that. I interviewed him 2 years ago, and he said he wants to do absurd stuff because defenses have strict rules of schemes, and he wants to hit guys. It's part of why he does like the face mask stuff and the hitting guys and stuff, is because he wants to give defenses a picture that they've never seen before. Most people have not seen George Pickens do any of this stuff. Like that's why, and I don't think people understand when they say, like, I think there was a couple of clips where people were like, man, you really don't know what George Pickens is going to do. That's what he wants to do, the absurdness. Yeah. And you can read my interview with him. It was one of the last things I did at The Ringer. But this is like, he's a weird guy, and he wants to be a weird guy. And he says the number one group of DBs he kills, his words, not mine, is overthinkers. Because he's talking about Xavier Howard was one of the people. This was 2 years ago. Jalen Ramsey, again, 2 elite guys 2 years ago. Because they're sitting there saying, what's George Pickens going to do? And the answer is something you've never seen before. And I think with Russell Wilson throwing moon balls, there's a connection there that I don't think they're going to score 40 points a game ever, but you just connect on 3 of those and the defense can do the rest.
Yeah, 100%. And that's not a really good answer for that, because like in today's NFL, where we're thinking about, all right, we got to limit big plays, we got to play too high and all that stuff. Well, if you have one guy who's just willing to outrun all the coverage and one guy who's willing to outthrow all the coverage, and even if he doesn't get it all the way there, but he's got faith in 14 to go up and get it, which I would too. That's what he's great at. It's a pretty big tactical advantage for that team. Even if, like you said, they will never probably score 40 points a game. They're never going to have the sickest route combinations in the intermediate level of the field. It's going to be a lot of touchdown to check down stuff, but when you have George Pickens out there, I'm looking for those touchdowns too. I think he's played great football this year.
I just got the transcript of the interview up. I just want to read it for a second. First of all, you mentioned like the outrunning stuff. That's actually what Dable and Josh Allen did their last year together, if you remember, really effectively, is teams put a too high ceiling on their offense, and they said, what if we just threw past that ceiling? What if we just like went 20 yards beyond the 2 high safeties and we're going to be fine? So this is the only thing I want to read, and they'll end the episode. So Kenny Pickett to me was like, you need to bring up aliens to George Pickens. Okay. And he said that he had regaled the team the night before, the week before, with his plan for when the aliens come. George Pickens' plan for when the aliens come. And his plan is sending 3 people. 3 people. Number 1 is LeBron James, because he looks like an alien and he'd be the only one that could save us. Okay. Number 2 is Rihanna. Don't know why. Never really expanded on that, but Rihanna, we're sending Rihanna to the aliens. And number 3 is Mike Epps, noted comedian Mike Epps. And the reason is he's a comedian who could distract them.
There you go. I think there's a little bit of LeBron James, Rihanna, and a comedian who can distract them all in George Pickens' game.
Thank you, Matt Harmon.
Appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you.